Maybe that was it. Okay, I just knew there was something.
Only one problem.
I thought the NOW referred to like an acronym.
Well, not according to the there's a person on this one, right?
Gentlemen, I asked you to come forward. We're going to start our meeting with you. And come forward here. And
my name is Eric Stano. I'm the Vice President of the Seattle Police Management Association.
My name is Dan Oliver. I'm President of the Seattle Police Management Association, and I'm here to speak for the union, not the department per se.
Sergeant Rich ONeill. I'm President of the Seattle Police Officers Guild and a member of the department for 27 years. The Guild is not against any kind of civilian oversight or public accountability. We support a fair, a open, a neutral discipline system, and that's what we want. The Guild, when the OPA first came into existence in 1999, the Police Guild members ratified that contract. That passed the membership. And we were encouraged, even though it was a new system, we were going down a road that had never been followed before. The Guild was in support, and the membership supported that contract. The system is working. The system, at times, there's little tweaks that can be done to the system, and we're always open to those. But there's just very many officer privacy things that are discussed in there. And when someone does get a copy of that, we want as much of it redacted as possible to protect the officer's privacy. And that is basically our opposition to having, files sustained, not sustained, everything open for anyone to read. Some of them are very personal, and some of them are very, could really expose the officer to some safety hazards and their family. Again, they're living in the community. Their kids go to the schools. Their spouses shop at the stores. And an officer wants to protect their privacy. I don't know any officer that, for instance, has their name in the phone book. Just as long as I've been on, that doesn't happen.
This will not be subject to mandatory bargaining. What are some of those topics? What are some of those suggestions that you think are high priority that you think would improve the OPA system?
Governor, I've been asked that question many times. I think if I had to change one thing about the OPA system, it would be the triage portion of the process. When a complaint walks in the door, what do you do with it? Again, I believe that the OPA system is best suited for serious acts of misconduct. Fortunately, in Seattle, we don't have a whole lot of those. But I think if the OPA investigators and the OPA office would focus and spend more time focusing on serious acts of misconduct, use of force, things of that nature, and we're freed up from the more minor complaints. The officer wasn't wearing a name tag. The officer appeared rude to me. These kind of things that have often been full-blown investigations. I don't think the system was ever designed to be used for those kind of incidents.
Need to be in the streets and the courtrooms. I mean, I think we all agree that trust is a key component for any police officer, and that really your trust when your honesty is your calling card on the street, and without it you can't do your job. And we all know that Right. We all know that the one headline or the act of truly a bad police officer could do more harm to every good police officer and undo tons of work people do daily out on the street. Clearly, as I said, honesty is your calling card, not just on the street, but in the courtroom when police officers are called to testify. One of the recommendations that the last panel made was that there would be a rule issued by the police chief that lying, cheating, and stealing would not be allowed by police officers. There would be resultant termination. Very clear rules that people understood that it was not allowed. It was not adopted. Could you tell me any reason why that should not be a rule in the Seattle Police Department?
I was just reviewing our manual section before I came here, called Standards and Duties, 1.003 in the Seattle Police Manual. It says right in there, officers will be truthful.
But it does not say they will be terminated if they lie, cheat, or steal. Is that correct?
No, further down it says that officers who do not cooperate, for instance, it even mentions an OPA investigation and found to have lied, that is grounds for termination.
Disturbing, maybe several of us, is the implications and questions that were raised by the video about the process of investigating complaints. And the fact that the officer was never asked why you rode away in a bicycle. To me, I'm not an expert, but from an officer safety point of view, leave an officer by himself with two suspects and a civilian who's walking in between the suspects on a street corner, it doesn't seem safe for the partner that they're leaving behind. And for the questions never to be asked, and then no discipline comes from that, it's very disturbing in terms of our looking at the process. And that's, I think, certainly following up with Governor Locke's question, it's very disturbing to me.
But what I would have to say to that is the allegation that someone would plant narcotics on someone is one of the most serious allegations someone can make. Someone's guilty of that, they need to go to prison. To jump to the conclusion that I think, to answer your question, I think the question should have been asked. And I think our OPA investigators do a very good job with the limited training that they can receive. That would have been a good question to ask. But because it wasn't asked, or because he did drive around the corner or whatever, someone to jump to the conclusion and say, well, he must have been up to no good. You make a sustained finding on an allegation like that. Like I said, someone needs to go to prison.
No, I think we're...
Mostly, Mr. O'Neill, could I just ask, you made an interesting comment this evening that the OPA's resources are best dedicated to serious acts of misconduct within the police department. Of course, you're the union head, you're the head of the Police Officers Guild. What happens to the majority of complaints that are voiced to the OPA by citizens? The majority.
They're all investigated right now, currently. The triage portion of the complaint is they're sent through different channels to investigate. But my comments earlier were that the City of Seattle investigates things that other major police departments wouldn't give the time of day to. I think the OPA should be reserved for serious acts and let other venues like mediation handle the lower level.
Well, when you say that you believe that all complaints to the OPA are investigated.
I know they're recorded. I know they are written down. There is a phone log, there is a contact log, and they are recorded. Now, if someone calls and says Martians are landing on the Space Needle and an officer was rude to them, of course that probably won't get the amount of attention that a use of force complaint would get. Someone may make a discretionary decision that doesn't warrant attention.
The Martian complaint.
Correct.
Yeah. But in fact, when you're talking about a contact log and someone jotting down a few lines about a complaint, in fact, that does not comprise an investigation, does it?
Well, there is some portion of discretion that has to go into it. That's why I used that absurd example. Not every time a person calls is there misconduct involved. Sometimes people call and are just upset. For instance, I got a red light ticket. I don't think I deserved it.
Right.
That's not misconduct. There's a venue to argue that, and it's called the court system.
Exactly. But wouldn't you say that it's accurate that statistically, historically, in the Seattle Police Department, 2/3 of all complaints are dismissed as contact log cases?
I don't know the exact figures. There's a great deal. There's more contact logs than there are investigations.
So, in other words, not everything is investigated. The majority of contacts result in contact logs.
But a contact log is a preliminary investigation. Someone does, if you say, if you made an allegation about an officer, there would be some level of looking into it, and if someone determined, usually a supervisor up down there at the OPA, that it didn't warrant misconduct, it would be listed as a contact log.
So do you agree with my assessment that that is the majority of complaints that go to the OPA?
Probably, because they receive lots and lots of phone calls.
And definitionally, how does an officer recording a phone call, or perhaps just recording a few lines of notes about a phoned-in complaint, how does that actually comprise what's often called an investigation?
Well, I wish I could come up with a better example, but an officer would, a sergeant that's down there would look, okay, I'll be right there, would look into it, give a preliminary investigation, and that might be the officer you're complaining about was in Hawaii at the time, so he wasn't even there. So that would be listed as a...
So an investigation would involve, for instance, calling up to see where the officer was at the time.
Correct.
Making a phone call, maybe making a few phone calls to establish an investigatory record.
They're calling me, so I have to go. Thanks.
All right. Have a nice evening. Oh, hi. So you're Bob Berkowitz, long-time head of the Public Defender Agency?
Right.
Right. So let me ask you this. I think the panel is open to some criticism that you're spending quite a bit of time going back and forth over the famous cocaine bust of Mr. Patterson by Officer Newbert and his partner. And you brought that up again tonight. What really is the practical value of raking back and forth over details of the cocaine bust? The specific detail you went over this evening was apparently 90 seconds during which one of the officers was out of video frame, apparently riding away on his bicycle.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to what I said.
But I mean, why did you bring that up as a relevant comment?
I don't have anything to add to what I said.
I mean, aren't you examining the structure of the police department?
I don't have anything to add.
Oh, did you receive my materials on the Cobain house?
Yes, I did.
And what's your initial reaction?
I don't have it.
So isn't that an opportunity to look at serious misconduct within the OPA? Do you think you're going to have a reaction to that material sometime in the future?
Yeah, that, I mean, it's
I've looked at it. I don't think I'm going to have any more reaction than the sheriff's already given me.
Does looking at the material comprise reading the material?
I'm going to ask you to read me a note.
That's a perfectly reasonable question. You'd be surprised how many times in looking into police oversight, people tell me that they look at materials, and looking at materials does not comprise reading them. So if you don't mind my asking a second time, did you read the materials on the Kurt Cobain homicide?
I read some of your enormous material, and I asked you...
I believe it was 23 pages, which is exactly the number of pages that was generated by Ms. Olson in looking at the famous cocaine.
At an arm's length structure.
So if 23 pages was an enormity to you, then I think you'd have to agree that Ms. Olson's 23 pages on the cocaine bust was an enormity also. So what you find in my pages is the OPA ignoring evidence of police corruption in a homicide. Fixing evidence in a homicide.
I have one and only one thought.
Isn't that much more serious than an officer riding out of frame on his bicycle for 90 seconds, about which very little can be said or concluded? Mr. Berkowitz, isn't the panel examining trivialities? So you're an attorney. What's the legal basis of your asking to be left alone in terms of you're discussing trivialities in police misconduct rather than the profound implications of fixing a homicide scene? in the Kurt Cobain case.
So no, the review board.
Give you another example of when this guy wants to be left alone, when he's your lawyer or when he's the head official at the Defender Association, and you're saying, you know, I think that what my attorney is doing comprises misconduct because it doesn't seem to want to give me any of the really necessary help to actually win the case. It seems to be a complete disconnect in terms of providing the legal assistance I need and a rush to go to trial for no particular reason. And Berukowitz, I never got more than a few lines out of Berukowitz in terms of responding as to why his subordinate attorneys were acting in this way. Breaking rocks in the hot sun. That's what they had lined up for me. Leave us alone. Even when they're your standby attorneys, the refrain is the same. Leave me alone. I don't want to answer complex legal questions. If you have a legal question, go to the 6th floor of the King County Courthouse and ask a librarian. That's what they're there for, you know, to assist you in providing legal advice. Don't ask your standby attorney. We don't want to answer hard legal questions. But if you're a convicted drug dealer who is making an accusation that may or may not be true, that the notorious Officer Newbert and his partner dropped a pebble of cocaine in your lap while you're sitting in a wheelchair, that's something that needs to be gone over in excruciating detail on municipal TV and public access TV. Because, by golly, when I see a cop get on a bicycle and ride out of video frame, I want answers, man. I want answers from someone who's completely disconnected from the case. There's nothing more about it than I do from watching that grainy video on TV. Well, Ms. Olson, the question for the evening is...
you know what, I need to talk to you.
I know, but real quickly, one question. How many of the complaints were investigated at OTA?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that...
Ma'am, what proportion of... Ms. Olson?
Yeah. I mean...
$146,000 a year. You should be prepared to answer this question.
We're talking right now.
I'll wait momentarily.
Oh, you are. Good for you. Good for you. Why don't I call you this week? That's the easiest thing to do is call you. No, hold on. I don't have any problem.
Oh, Ms. Olson, just my one question.
Richard, we're still talking.
I know,
sorry.
I've got a schedule too.
Yeah.
If I could just
we'll
ask,
have to catch you next time, okay?
what comprises an investigation? Because you're the openness person on the police department. You're the OPA head. I got a lot more frankness from Rich ONeill of the Police Guild, the notorious police officers guild.
I'm in the middle of a conversation.
Okay, but you have just a moment, don't you?
No, I don't. No, because I'd like to go home to my family.
Well, this must be a terribly important conversation. Wouldn't you like to tell people in Seattle what comprises an OPA investigation?
Yeah.
Do you know what proportion of all
Richard,
complaints...
I am having a conversation right now.
I understand,
but...
but...
not to be interrupted, okay?
Well, you don't like certain things. I'd like an answer to my question. What proportion of all police complaints
I am asking Catherine some
are
questions
brushed aside
as a member of the
contact log
committee.
cases?
So
Do you know the answer to the question?
I don't have the stats on the top of my head, so if you want to send me an
Do you believe it's
email
roughly
about it.
two-thirds?
No,
Do you believe that it's a majority of cases are dismissed?
Yeah, are you?
Are a majority of cases dismissed without investigation of complaints that go to the OPA? Is that true? It's not funny.
It is funny because we're trying to have a conversation about police accountability. So you're interrupting a conversation between a member of the panel and the OPA director.
Are the majority of citizen complaints know the answer to that. The answer is yes, right? Roughly 2/3 of all complaints are dismissed without investigation. And what comprises an investigation?
Is it legal? Do you have to put up with this?
Well, she's the openness and accountability person on the police department.
I've asked you to not be bothering
And
me
you've
right
been a
now.
lot
I'm trying to
less
speak to
frank
the-
than the police guild union president. We see her